Hi, Joe.
Hi,
Thank you so much for being here today.
It's a pleasure.
Joanne and I know each other from a very long time. In fact, one of my very old friends.
Yes.
I think we were like 14 or 15 or something.
Yeah, I think so. It was the age where people, I don't know whether you remember how the internet used to work, and we each had these little modems at home, and we were allowed,
With the
like
loud
an hour. Yeah, exactly. So, do you remember IRC?
Yes, I do remember IRC.
These little, chat rooms where that's probably where we first kind of met, because I don't think that, back then we probably weren't taking tuition together.
Yeah, and then I think we took tuitions, but then there's been a lot that we've done together. And in fact, one of my highlights is that it was our first job ever. We were co-hosting a TV show. Do you remember that?
It was terrible. It was literally, I wish I could find a video again of that time. It was terrible and at the same time awesome, because we used to laugh all the time.
Exactly.
And I think it set the mood for the kind of the rest of the way of how I do things. Like, I remember at one point we had to write our own script.
Yep.
And I did it like 10 minutes before going into recording, and that's how I do my podcast now.
And after that, in fact, we became laureates together in the same year. We went to London and started uni, and then life just happened. Mm-hmm. So do you want to just tell us about what has happened and how did you end up back in Mauritius?
So, as you rightly said, we studied in London together, then we started working together. At one point we were roommates as well, which is quite funny. In Notting Hill, with just us and the rat. We were talking about the rat. We won't go into the rat story.
No.
And then about 10 years ago, I had my first child, and it was a very difficult experience for me. I came to Mauritius on my maternity leave, and I never left. And then I recreated a whole life here. I was already a qualified lawyer back in London. And then after my maternity leave, luckily in England, you actually get a proper maternity leave. So it was a year long. After my maternity leave, I started working here. And then fast forward 10 years now, I founded my own firm. I do tax law. I've always done tax law. I love it. And yes, I've got 2 beautiful children, a really supportive husband, and I'm really, really lucky.
Anyone who looks at your profile can see that you're really successful. You're running your own busy law firm. You're a really accomplished person. Therefore, you must be a happy person. So could you share with us a little bit, what is happiness to you?
It's a really dangerous assumption to think that someone's happiness is someone's status or profile, or what you see on the external world is reflective of their internal state of happiness. I think that's one of the magical and insidious side of technology. You're basically able to create how you want the world to see you. So I guess you're referring to my professional profile, because I've come off social media for in relation to my personal profile. So I think it's completely unrelated. So my professional profile does not reveal my state of happiness. So for me, my definition of happiness now is very different to what it used to be sort of 5, 6 years, 10 years ago. So now I see happiness as finding joy in the present moment. That is my definition of happiness. I think society has conditioned us to qualify happiness by reference to external factors. Yeah. And by external factors, I don't mean material factors only. It could be when I get this amazing job, I'll be happy. When I have 2 kids, I'll be happy. When I have this great marriage, I'll be happy. Mm-hmm. When I have this beautiful house, I'll be happy. Yeah. But there's not enough focus on, am I happy within myself? Mm-hmm. So finding happiness within yourself and in the present, I think, that's my personal opinion at least, that is what defines happiness. We have a tendency as human beings, because we've got the intelligence that we have, to think back, to look at the past and refer to moments of happiness or sadness by reference to the past, or the future. We project ourselves into the future. I will be happy when. But very rarely we find happiness in the present moment, because we're always thinking back or forward. So for example, I am happy now because I'm with my friends and we're in
Yeah.
this wonderful hotel, this wonderful location. I don't know whether I'll be happy in an hour, depending on the traffic and who's driving on the road. So, so it's a challenge, but I think finding happiness in the present moment, finding joy in the present moment is how I would define happiness.
So
However
just-
abstract that might seem.
It is a little abstract, and I think I already told you, I warned you that this conversation is probably going to be quite deep and meaningful.
Sure.
I just wanted to pick up on what you said.
Yeah.
I mean, is what you're saying that happiness is unconditional? It does not depend on things that happen to you. For example, I mean, you're a successful lawyer, an entrepreneur. Although you're saying you're not on social media, but you're quite an influencer on LinkedIn. Some people actually comment on your platforms. So, I mean, all that does that not play a role in bringing happiness to you?
It does and it doesn't. So it does in the sense that, as I said, I link it back to, finding joy, as I said, finding joy in the present moment. And I'm not saying I'm an expert at it. It's still a journey. I'm still learning along that journey. I think another misconception that society has conditioned us or taught us is that we're meant to be happy all the time. We're not meant to be happy all the time. I think the nature of human life is that there are deep moments of joy and deep moments of pain. I think what we can try to do is to minimize the suffering. I think suffering is different from pain. So we will always go through highs and we will always go through lows. To find pockets of moments in your life that will become a whole. And I realize I'm still talking abstract, but I will try to break it down into real examples. Pockets of joy that will contribute to the overall happiness. So for example, I mean, you referred to, how I'm like on social media. I put a post recently about exercise and what we do at work. We work out 3 times a week. I'm often told off for bullying my colleagues into doing the exercise. That makes me happy, not bullying them. Doing the exercise. We did one yesterday where we all felt like death at the end of it. We worked really hard for an hour. And it's not only linked to the kind of, I think there are hormones that are released when you're exercising. But during that time when you've got no time to think of anything else, you have to be in the moment. That makes me happy. So yes, it is an external factor influencing my state of happiness. But for me, that is the best example of being happy in the moment, because you really haven't got time when you're lifting 20 kilos to think of anything else other than being present. And it's the same for, all the stuff that we do on social media. When I'm having podcasts and I'm interviewing someone and I'm learning something from them, I find happiness in that moment. And I think, again, it links to the conditioning that society has taught us that we're meant to be happy all the time. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that's possible.
Yeah. Like you pointed out, we try and avoid pain and things, but if we were just aiming for this consistent, no pain, but no, then you're missing out on the peaks of joy and the lows of sadness. But it's like if our very heart rate has peaks and troughs, I guess, and if it was just straight line, we would be dead.
Yeah.
So
we'd be dead.
yeah,
Absolutely.
it's interesting about like what you were saying about the highs and the lows. I mean, that's all life, isn't it?
It is part of life and it's part of growth. And also, I mean, coming back to social media, I think, you read about these really young children or teenagers being influenced by these stars or celebrities who have this, filtered vision of life, and you think that is happiness. And first of all, it's probably 90% fake. And second of all, it's making you define happiness by reference to external factors. Not always material. Sometimes they're non-material factors, but they are still external factors.
Yeah.
Interesting that you talked about teenagers and kids going on social media. But you have 2 beautiful kids, and they're both at Juxbridge, and we love them.
Yes.
I've seen Chloe when she was a baby in London, and just seeing her, now, and she's 10 years old, and amazing. Do you not fear somehow that because children, they perceive their parents a bit as role models? Do you not fear that she perhaps sees you as setting the standard for what an accomplished person, a happy person should be. So therefore, if I want to be happy one day, I need to be what my mom is.
It is a challenge. It is difficult because, and when I say that, I'm thinking of material things because they live. I think they're very fortunate in the way they live. I think they
live a comfortable life.
They live a comfortable life, and so my husband and I, go out of our way to remind them constantly that the material things are not the things that should make you happy. But it is a struggle, you know, at the end of the day, we're all human beings. Coming back to the accomplished point, I'm not sure my children know what I do for a living. And that is a conscious choice on my part. I mean, I know, they know I'm a lawyer. I don't think they necessarily know what being a lawyer means or what I actually do for a living. And again, that is a conscious choice of my part to not influence them as to who they would want to be when they grow up. I mean, Raphael, for example, every day he changes his future to be. So one day he wants to be a chef. The next day he said he wants to be an astronaut. And then the next day he said he wants to be a fitness trainer. He was looking up the other day, how do I have abs, Mum? And I was like, you're 7 years old, come on. So I think, you know, I don't think they know what I do for a living. Having said that, they do see the products of it. So they see, as you said, we have a comfortable life. So what we do as parents is we try to teach them to find these moments of joy by reference to enjoying the moment and not projecting on, I need to have this iPad to be happy, or I need to go to this hotel to be happy. Yes, sure, they enjoy themselves we were just at the hotel last weekend. So, but trying not to attach too much importance to material wealth, but it is easier said than done.
I mean, speaking of finding joy in every moment, I'm sure you have a whole album in your mind of your joyful moments, but could you give us an example of a few of those? It doesn't matter if they're cliched or not, but are there 3 moments of joy that stick out in your mind, and why?
Gosh, that is very difficult, partly because of my changing attitude by reference to happiness, as I mentioned earlier. I think I would probably use the cliche moments that everyone or most people would use, you know, the day I got married, the day I had my children. Again, and it's a journey, it's a conscious choice. I try not to cast my mind back too much, because it would be living in the past. So I try to find happiness in the present or the immediate past. So for example, what I would say to that is the last moment that made me terribly happy was when I finished my workout yesterday. I was really happy with that. And then waking up with, and again, I know it probably sounds cliche, waking up and trying to find something to be grateful for, I think grounds me and makes me happy in that moment that I wake up. There may be other things that happen later on in the day. It might be a dangerous trend to refer to really happy moments in your life and trying to recreate that after.
That's really amazing. So you have implemented a daily gratitude practice.
Yes, exactly. I wish, one thing that I wish I had time for that I haven't quite implemented yet is finding the time to meditate, because I think you've got to set aside a specific period of time for that. But waking up and thinking of 3 things that you ought to be grateful for, it takes 30 seconds.
This is something that, in fact, at school at Juxbridge this year, we've been focusing on happiness. But how can you become happy? Because not everyone just wakes up and bing, they're happy. And I think gratefulness is one of them, having this attitude of gratitude and thinking about things we're grateful for when we're educating the kids to find those things. And some are even doing gratitude journals, journaling, and others are meditating, and others are just like thinking about one thing. You don't need to think about 3 or 5, but just the one thing. And being grateful actually brings you to a different level of happiness, because you're like, oh yeah, actually I am happy.
Exactly.
That's awesome. I've heard recently a therapist say that we can even find joy in a moment if we just breathe in deeply and like just be there and be like, okay, really what's happening around me, and that can be a source of, this micro meditation can be a real source of joy, which is really something that I think is wonderful.
But then there are times, where you're faced with challenges in life. It's not always rosy, and it's not always natural to think about, things to be grateful about. Failure is one of them. And I was fascinated actually when I heard that you gave a speech quite recently at a graduation ceremony at the University of Mauritius.
Yes.
And I think the topic was failure. So how do you find happiness in failure, and why do you think that's important?
Again, I don't think you're meant to find happiness in failure. I think, as I said earlier on, there are moments of joy and there are moments of pain in your life. What we should aspire to do is minimize the suffering from that pain. So I think the moments of failure, whether they're conventional markers of failure or otherwise, but we can talk about these conventional markers, you're not going to be happy at the time you fail and the moment that you fail. So I think the challenge, and what I spoke about, is being taught from a very young age, which I was unfortunate enough to be taught failure, and that is partly what my speech was about, is being taught from a very early age how to see failure as an opportunity for growth. Unfortunately for me, I learned that later in life because I was, I don't like the word groom, but I was groomed to always excel academically. So in that sense, I hadn't known failure growing up. When I started professional life and I had a child, I found that moment very, very challenging, and society hadn't prepared me. And I'm not blaming anyone in particular. I think we're just products of society and how we're brought up. I found this moment of failure very, very painful, and the suffering that arose from it. Fortunately, I managed to transform that into a moment of growth. Yeah. So if I look back more recently in my more, I would say, more recent failure, but again, that's probably a conventional marker of failure, but I don't see it as that, but maybe someone else would see it as a failure. So when I look back at my journey into prison chambers, and I was thinking about this morning, what is my most recent failure? So when before prison chambers, I was a partner at a law firm, and by the time I left, I was a senior partner. So the profile, as you said, would say Johanne Hague is a senior partner at X law firm. But I felt as a leader in that firm, I was a failure because I probably didn't know how to lead. I was arrogant. I was intolerant. I expected people to respect me when I didn't respect them. So I felt that, again, going by conventional markers, I was probably a failure then. But that taught me, when I created Prison Chambers, I used these lessons, these very painful moments, as opportunity for growth. How can I serve my people instead of thinking how can they serve me? So I would hope that now I'm on my way to creating a firm where I've turned that failure into a success. It's still a journey. I'm still learning. I still can be quite intolerant sometimes, but in respect of quality of work, etc. But I have changed my attitude to how you're a leader. Had I not had these moments of failure, maybe I wouldn't be as good leader.
So you're grateful in a way for
absolutely
that experience.
100%. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
And again, this is what I thought as an example as a recent failure. But again, as you see the external world, you see the CV, and you think, great, she's always been a great leader. No, it's a journey. It's all about how to turn these moments of perceived failure into opportunities for growth. It doesn't mean that you'll be happy at the time.
That's right. I was going to say this. Isn't this very much a question of the benefit of hindsight? Back in that moment when you were feeling, people are not respecting me or whatever, you're not thinking, well, what is that going to do to me? It's not natural, I think, for people. But maybe, like you say, maybe there is a certain grooming that we need to do towards our children so that they actually see the failure there and then
Exactly.
as an opportunity.
Exactly. And I think it's absolutely, as you said, it's the hindsight, but with growth, the time span becomes shorter and shorter. So it probably took me a year to recognize the benefit of hindsight. How could I have been a better leader, or how could I become a better leader? But now when something happens at work, it's become automatic that I don't think, okay, yeah, we've messed up or we've done this wrong. How can we turn it? So it's become ingrained in me now to automatically, but that's a journey. It's taken 5 years to get there. But I think it really requires introspection, looking deep within yourself and trying not to see yourself as a victim or trying to find fault in, others, basically.
I've noticed, like, I really feel like in general, I think people on the whole can appreciate, that we've moved, moving toward a more holistic and like maybe finding joy in the moment. I really do feel like that's out there in the world. However, I've lived here in Mauritius now for quite a while, and I've noticed that society is still very fixed on or focused on results, particularly exam results.
Yeah, I think it all starts at home, right? So you're only, my parents did the best they could given the time that they evolved in. So I have no ill will at all towards the way that I was brought up, because they saw academic success as a window for me to have opportunities in life. I was not born privileged. I probably wouldn't have been able to study abroad had I not got a scholarship. So I think that, within that time, they thought what they did was right. Having said that, I think we would all agree that generally, not for all people, but generally, the standard of living has improved across the whole, around the world and in Mauritius, compared to 20, 30 years ago. So the mindset has to change at home first. It has to change with the parents. So how I raise my child, how we raise our children, will determine on the markers that they will think are valuable. So, for example, at home, I'm not even sure they know what exams are. I mean, I know that at Jigsbridge you do little assessments just to gauge where they are, but it's certainly, it's not ingrained in their mind that I have to be ranked first or 10th or whatever. And even those little sort of competitions that you do. So, for example, my kids are really excited about the spelling bees that you're doing. They see that as, oh, I got like a little badge, and but I think it's really important for parents to ingrain in them that it's not about being first or last. It's not about having 100% in an exam, but it's difficult. It's a difficult journey because I might have a different attitude having been through what I've been through, but I'm not sure that's the case for a lot of people. And unfortunately, I can't change them, and I don't think necessarily, no matter what we say, will change them. They have to change themselves first and then pass that on to their children. So I don't have any magic formula to that. I know what works for us and our children, and we've always told them, do your best. I'm like that at work as well. I don't condone laziness. So as long as you do your best, failure is okay. You don't have to be a whiz at maths. I mean, I did maths, but and I know it has many uses in life, but
don't say anything bad about that.
I haven't used maths since I finished school. So yeah, I tell my daughter all the time, you don't. It's okay if you're not great at maths, so long as you do your best. But I'm not sure parents say that.
So I mean, I don't think you're a great athlete, but you're very active and stuff. But let's say, imagine you were an athlete, you were an Olympic gold medalist, and your child is competing at school for a race and then doesn't win, doesn't even make the podium. You telling the child, it's okay, you did your best. But the child replies, because children do talk.
Sure.
And they are smart, and they'll be like, well, it's easy for you to say, Mom, you were a gold medalist. You don't know disappointment, you don't know failure. Like now, probably your child will be like, well, Mom, it's all good for you to say I'm trying my best at exams, but you're a laureate. You got a first in law. See where you are now. Who are you to tell me that it's okay to fail? You don't understand me.
Sure. Okay. I haven't got that yet, but I'm sure it will come. So I think my answer to that, and we do tell them that on little things such as eating porridge that we force them to eat 3 times a week.
Yeah.
You are privileged. I wasn't. My parents worked extremely hard, and I went to government school as you did, Rishi. They worked extremely hard to give me the best chances in life. They have the privilege, they have the luxury of not having to worry about that, at least for now. Situations might change. So I'm giving them space to grow and to figure out who they want to be on their own without the pressure of having to aim for that scholarship. So I don't think it's, I should generalize by saying no parents should push their child academically, for example, because, I was talking to one of the laureates 2 weeks ago, and I saw a little bit of myself in him when I was his age. He's so driven, and he had a very specific goal, which was to get that scholarship. And I admire him. I think for him, in his situation, I would probably do the same. But I think he was self-driven rather than being pushed by his parents. So that's what I would answer to my kids. You are privileged. You are lucky to be in the situation that you are in.
I also feel like we as parents try and protect our children from experiencing any sort of pain, whereas that's actually not going to help them at all. We can still sit with them and hold their hand and be like, I know it hurts, baby, but it's going to be okay. I promise it doesn't look like that now, but I think that my wish is that we could, as parents, just be okay with failure or with the pain and sitting there in it, and then it does eventually pass.
I think it is easier said than done. I appreciate that. I realize that, but I think our duty as parent, going back to the first question, is not to make our children happy, but to give them with the right tools, the right nurturing, supporting, loving environment, so that they can find their own happiness.
Definitely.
Failure doesn't define you as a person, and it should not, because it's not just an exam, it's not just a race that's going to make you as a person. And so I think happiness is the awareness that you are more than just one event, one
Correct.
thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. You run a very busy legal practice. Do you feel it's important to spend time with your kids to be happy, like as a parent? Like,
yes and no. So I think that it really depends where you are in your life. I think going back to what I just mentioned just now by reference to children being happy, I think it's important for children to have a loving, nurturing environment. So going back to my own childhood, I remember the first 5 years of my life. My parents were very young when they had me, so I lived with my grandparents, and my grandparents pretty much raised me when my parents were hard at work.
wow.
I didn't have an unhappy childhood. I had an extremely happy childhood. So it wasn't necessary for my parents to be there, to be present, for me to be happy, because I was surrounded with love and affection. And I don't begrudge them for that at all, because as I said, they were working really hard to be able to afford a piece of land so that they can build their own house. So I think it really depends where you are in life. If my goal at the moment was to, build this really successful law firm, which it's not really, but let's say for argument's sake it was, then for my own happiness, I don't think it's necessary for me to spend time at home. Having said that, for my children's well-being and for them to feel supported and loved, etc., then it's important for me to spend time at home. So again, it rejoins what I said at the beginning. Your happiness, I think, in my humble opinion, shouldn't be determined by external factors such as I have 3 children or 5 children, so I need to be happy because of that. So yeah, I think it really depends where you are in life and what makes you happy at that specific point in life, albeit that it may sound selfish sometimes because you're focusing on your own happiness rather than that of others.
I don't know if you've found people complaining like to you, or you've heard it around, but I definitely hear parents complaining about being so busy. I don't have time for anything. I especially don't have time to play with my kids or to be there or whatever. And your answer is so interesting because it's like, well, yeah, no, you don't have to be there. Do you have any like anything to say about how people could, instill that happiness if from afar, if they're not there?
I think that I would say quality matters more than quantity. So, for example, when I mean, we live different lives here because we have a supportive environment, and it's fairly common in Mauritius to be surrounded by a family system or other sorts of support system, as opposed to Western Europe, for example. So what I mean by quality instead of quantity is, my being there for my children is not depending on the number of hours that I'm physically there, but the little time that I do have with them to make sure this is quality time. So the hour before bed that I'm with them, I'm not on my phone, although I'm guilty of that, or on my computer, but I'm actually being there present with them. So I think I would say quality over quantity, even if it's half an hour a day.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that.
I want to play devil's advocate.
Sure.
You know me. You know what you said about you actually don't begrudge your parents because they did the best that they could at the time. It was the right thing to do that you were with your grandparents.
Yeah.
I do know of other people who actually have an opposite view of the situation. They feel, you know what, I don't care whether my parents were, couldn't afford to get this or that for me. What I cared about was them spending time with me because that's what mattered to me. What do you say when you hear, I'm sure you've heard stories like this.
Yes, I have. I have actually heard stories like this. And I would say that, I mean, it's difficult to put myself in their shoes, but I would say that if I go back to my example, the reason I was happy is that I had a loving, nurturing environment. So my grandparents, I was in their house and we had so much fun. So in that sense, it didn't really matter that much to me. So, I guess one question those people could ask themselves is, well, what was lacking then? Did they have a nurturing, supportive environment then, or what actually, either a stranger looked after them or not very loving grandparents or whatever?
Or they just felt neglected by the actual parents, because they're so young and little. You can't expect them to know that there is a bigger purpose to their parents not being physically there. And they hold on to that.
They shouldn't. Yeah, they shouldn't hold it. I mean, bitterness has never, or resentment has never done anything positive for anyone. And again, it goes back to the concept of happiness and not living in the past or the future. Again, easier said than done, but don't live in the past.
Yeah.
And so talking about the present, let's say you have a friend that's struggling at the moment with this situation and saying, well, I have the option of doing more hours in the office and I can afford at that point to get a nanny, that will spend time with my child, look after the homework or whatever it is, spend some time at home, or do it myself, I won't do the extra hours or whatever, and I will focus on my child. What is the formula? What is the right formula?
I don't think there's a right formula. I think it goes back to what is your specific goal at this particular point in time. Someone aiming, and I'm not saying this is the kind of the right or the wrong choice, but someone aiming for that particular promotion because they think that will enable me to develop myself in my career, will probably want to put the additional hours. Whereas someone who feels that I am not spending enough time with my child and I can afford, because not everyone can afford to do so, I can afford not to spend these additional hours at work, then maybe I would need to spend more time. So I don't think happiness is linked to one or the other. You can be very happy at work and you can be very happy at home, and it can be the other way.
Yeah.
You can be very miserable spending time with your children because your mind is elsewhere, because your goal at this point in time is different.
And to be honest, and we get a lot of parents that ask us that, I think when parents try to do everything for the child and be there, be that person, be the babysitter, be the one that will teach the child in the afternoon how to do homework or whatever, sometimes it can actually go the opposite direction.
Yes.
Because they are not trained to be teachers. And a lot of the times, the way you would react to your child, even if you're a teacher, would be different to how you would react to your students in the classroom.
Yeah. No, I absolutely, I 100% agree with you. And I mean, just the other day I was coaching Chloe with some home learning, and she was struggling with a really simple maths problem. She got the difficult ones right and the simple ones wrong. And I find myself snapping, and I kick myself for it after. But in the moment, you become impatient. And I thought to myself, I shouldn't put that burden on myself. I have to do everything. I have to be the super mom. I have to be there to. Well, I don't cook, as you know it. we can tell stories about my cooking.
I was the one doing the cooking, and she would just come at the end. And
no, I would invite Rishi for dinner, and then when he turned up.
Yeah. Welcome everyone to my feast.
Yes, exactly. Here you go.
Love
Go
it.
on. But I think it's unrealistic to expect us as parents to be everything all at once.
Yeah, sure. Your kids are growing up and they're soon going to be off to do their own things.
Yes.
What's your message to them in terms of finding happiness in life for themselves?
Again, it would sound like a cliche, but I would say be whoever you want to be. We're always teasing our daughter because she wants to be an actress. And coming from a very academic background, I would loathe to tell her, oh, but no, you need to go to X, Y uni if that's what she wants to do. But I did tell her you have to be good at maths in order to be an actress.
Okay.
So I expect the minimum, obviously. I think what is important is for them to know that there are no limitations in life. There are no glass ceilings, and these are the values that we try to teach them. That to have this deep self-faith to be able to be whoever they want to be, even though that's not who necessarily the parents would want them to be, because they're their own being. We're just there to guide them a little bit along the way.
But can I just say on that, it sounds cliche. We read about it all the time and we hear people talk about it.
Sure.
But in actual fact, it's a pretty hard thing for parents to do, to actually accept that my child will do anything and maybe completely different to what I had in mind for them to do and go on to achieve. And still be happy for them and wish them all the best.
But that's the journey. I think that's the journey of the parent, not the child.
Absolutely.
It's the parent to really go deep inside, say, why should I want my child to be a doctor or a lawyer? I mean, they're their own being. And I think, trying to project onto the children the life that we would have wanted to have, or that we currently have, we want them to have the same lifestyle, could be deeply damaging to the relationship that you have with your children. They could become resentful later in life.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been great, lovely.
Yeah, we could talk for hours longer. I'm sure.
I'm sure you have some gym to go back to, some lessons.
No, today is rest day because because I have another podcast to come after that. And then we have bigger night tonight, so I'm looking forward to that.
So thank you very much for being with us and sharing your wisdom to our audience. I'm sure they'll be very impacted by hearing what you've got to say today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Our pleasure.